It was a chilly Monday morning in downtown Atlanta. The courthouse was abuzz, murmurs echoing off the marble columns as people trickled into the public gallery. The case of the state versus Officer Travis Whitmore was about to begin, a trial with explosive implications. The defendant, a decorated white police officer, stood accused of unlawful assault, racial profiling, and evidence tampering. But what truly made the public take notice wasn't just the charges, it was the bizarre announcement that the state's lead prosecutor was a black teenage boy. As Officer Whitmore strutted into the courtroom, decked in a tailored suit and flanked by his defense team, he smirked confidently. He whispered to his lawyer, loud enough for the gallery to hear. "Unbelievable. They're sending in a damn high school kid to take me down? What, is this a prank? Is he going to beatbox his argument?" A few of his fellow officers seated in the back row chuckled, eyes filled with the same smugness. At the prosecution table sat a slender young man, perhaps no more than 17. He wore a sharply pressed navy blue suit, a thin tie, and a calm expression. His name was Elijah Brooks, and despite his youthful appearance, his demeanor was anything but juvenile. His afro was neatly shaped, and a simple briefcase sat beside him. Judge Marilyn Givens, an experienced black woman with a reputation for razor-sharp fairness, entered the courtroom. As everyone rose, her eyes subtly scanned Elijah. She gave no sign of favoritism, only a nod of acknowledgement. The courtroom settled. The air grew taut with anticipation. Officer Whitmore leaned back in his chair, chuckling again. "They're seriously letting him prosecute me?" But Elijah hadn't moved. He simply waited for the cue. When the judge finally said, "Counsel, you may proceed with your opening statement," the room hushed. Elijah rose. His voice was calm, measured, almost melodic. "Your Honor, members of the court, today you will hear the story of how a decorated officer abused the trust placed in him by this community. You will hear evidence undeniable, time-stamped, and corroborated that paints a very different picture than the one Officer Whitmore wants you to believe." His words carried weight beyond his years. The audience leaned forward. The reporters started scribbling faster. Whitmore's smirk began to flicker. Elijah calmly outlined the incident. A 32-year-old black man named Marcus Hill was violently detained outside a convenience store with no provocation. Surveillance footage showed Marcus placing his hands in the air and saying, "I'm not resisting," but Officer Whitmore tackled him to the ground, fracturing his ribs. No weapon was found. No charges were ever filed against Marcus. The officer's justification? He fit the description. Elijah played a clip from Whitmore's own body cam, pausing it on a frame where Marcus's hands were raised and Whitmore's taser was already deployed. "Tell me, officer," Elijah would later ask, "what part of not resisting looks like a threat to you?" The courtroom shifted uncomfortably. Whitmore's lawyer objected. Judge Givens overruled. For the next hour, Elijah laid out data, expert testimony, and detailed forensic analysis. He quoted obscure law, referenced precedent from both Georgia and federal circuits. There was no dramatic shouting, no pounding on the table, just calm, relentless truth. Whitmore's smirk evaporated. But the real turn came when Elijah revealed a sealed audio file. "Your Honor," he said, "this file was submitted late due to a court-mandated privacy review. It is, however, critical." Judge Givens allowed it. The audio crackled to life. It was Officer Whitmore's voice in a locker room, laughing with another officer. "You see the look on that dude's face? I had him pissing himself. These thugs always act tough till you show them who's boss. I don't care if my cam was on. Who's gonna stop me?" A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Whitmore's defense attorney scrambled, objecting on the basis of context and privacy. The judge silenced him. "You may sit down, counselor." Elijah stood calmly, a hand on his briefcase. "There's more," he said. He displayed a documented internal affairs report buried 2 years ago, indicating Whitmore had 4 previous complaints of excessive force, all quietly dismissed. The judge's brow furrowed. She leaned forward slightly. "And you, Mr. Brooks, how did you come upon this file?" she asked. Elijah didn't hesitate. "My father was a public defender. Before he passed, he left me with his case journals, things he couldn't legally pursue because they'd been suppressed. I reviewed every one of them. Officer Whitmore's name came up 5 times. The courtroom fell silent. Elijah's voice dipped to a whisper. He got away with it before. He was about to get away with it again. Until today. Suddenly, Whitmore stood up. "This is a setup," he yelled, pointing at Elijah. "He's not even a real prosecutor. He's just a kid. This is harassment." Judge Givens slammed her gavel. "One more outburst, and I'll hold you in contempt." Whitmore sat, fuming. He turned to his lawyer. "Do something." But even his counsel looked rattled. Because deep down, everyone knew the boy was right. In the next hour, Elijah called 2 surprise witnesses. A former officer who had quietly resigned after witnessing Whitmore plant evidence in another case, and a Latina store clerk who had been afraid to speak until Elijah tracked her down and promised she'd be protected. Their testimonies were damning. Elijah ended with a closing argument that brought some of the spectators to tears. Officer Whitmore believed no one could hold him accountable. He wore the badge as a shield from consequences, but justice doesn't care about your badge, your title, or your age. Justice stands for truth, and truth is not afraid. When he sat down, even Judge Givens took a moment before speaking. She looked directly at Whitmore. "Officer Travis Whitmore, based on the evidence presented, your actions constitute a violation of civil rights, perjury, and abuse of authority. You are hereby removed from active duty and referred for criminal investigation." Whitmore's mouth hung open. "Young man," she turned to Elijah, "this court acknowledges your brilliance, preparation, and courage. I would like a full review of your credentials submitted to my clerk. We may have a future prosecutor on our hands." Elijah, for the first time, smiled softly. As court adjourned, people began to applaud. Some rose to their feet. Elijah didn't linger. He simply packed his briefcase and walked out quietly. Whitmore, on the other hand, was approached by internal affairs agents at the courthouse steps. His mugshot was on the evening news by 6 p.m. Outside the courthouse, a reporter caught up with Elijah. "Why do this?" she asked. "Why take on a system like this at your age?" He looked into the camera, expression steady. "Because someone has to. Because silence isn't neutral. Because every time someone says he's just a kid, they're underestimating what youth can do." And with that, he disappeared into the crowd. 3 weeks later, Whitmore was indicted on multiple charges. Elijah's story went viral. Law schools sent him scholarship offers. Advocacy groups asked him to speak, but he kept his focus. 1 year later, Elijah Brooks became the youngest legal intern ever sworn in at the Georgia District Attorney's Office. Some said he was too young. Some still doubted him. But those who'd been in that courtroom, they never questioned him again. And as for Officer Whitmore Hay, was last seen in court once more. But this time in an orange jumpsuit, pleading for leniency. What would you do if the person they laughed at turned out to be the person who held their fate? Comment below.